Okay, well, I'll try not to cut you off, but maybe I should to make it comfortable.
You cut me off all you want to. I won't be offended.
Okay. Well, others might, and got to keep the audience happy. So,
You cannot live your life fearing what others will think. You have to think about it. You have to be concerned by it, but
okay, well, I've thought
you,
about that before because sometimes it's a signpost though to be like your keep
yeah,
your social like how you act socially in check though.
yeah. It's data. It's data. Use it like data, but it's all data. It's all tools.
Okay, it's what you do with them. Okay, well, I already started, so. Hello, Paul Vanderclay.
Hello, Andrea. How are you?
I'm good. I am
Good.
excited for this chat. That's going to be. I've decided it will be fruitful. I know it will be.
I I didn't have any question. It would be.
Okay, okay. So I've asked you here today because I wanted to speak to you about this estuary thing that you've been going on about, and you just put out a video about it, and I couldn't decide if I was disappointed or happy to get more information about it because I wanted to. This is what I wanted to be the estuary how to. But you
Oh,
already did. You did.
it's evolving.
Okay.
Okay, it's very much evolving, and it is evolving from conversation to conversation like this. So this will be a marker on the way to estuary. So have no fear.
Okay. Well, okay. I put them all aside then. So, okay. Can you give for any of my audience who doesn't know what we're talking about, what is estuary?
Well, people ask me that, and I say, well, look it up on Wikipedia. An estuary is a place usually where fresh water from a continent or an island flows out into the sea. And in biological terms, estuaries are one of the most diverse, productive, and interesting biomes that we know of because you have plants and animals that are freshwater and plants and animals that are saltwater, and they come together. So you can get creatures coming up from the sea. There are some creatures like salmon who they spawn upstream and they go out to the sea and then they return. And so I should probably describe for your listeners who don't necessarily watch my channel, that I am a pastor and I've been a pastor for quite a few years now. It doesn't feel like a lot of years to me, but I've been at my church now 23 years. And before that, I was a foreign missionary. And I have always been frustrated by how churches are walled gardens. And, listening to Jonathan Peugeot, I probably have a better understanding of the necessity of the walls, and I understand that. But churches are places that should feed the world, and fresh water, living water, should flow out from churches to bless the world in ways that the world sees obvious value from. So I started YouTube. I used to use Hangouts on the air to let people who are missing my sermons see the sermon. So if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see some very old YouTubes about guinea pigs with my daughters when they were small. And then there's a bunch of sermons. And then Freddie came along, and that was the start of the Freddie and Paul show. That was the start of my YouTube career. And I had maybe 15 subscribers at that point. And then I started making videos about Jordan Peterson.
Right.
And one of the things that happened fairly early on, which I knew would happen, was I started getting a lot of comments from Christians who would say things like, why are you talking so much about Jordan Peterson? You should talk about Jesus. And I would say, you can go to Livingstone's Christian Reformed Church that has my sermons and my Sunday school. And guess what? It's lots of Jesus, hardly any Jordan Peterson over there.
Hardly
But in
any.
this channel over here, I want to talk about Jordan Peterson. I want to talk about what I want to talk about, and I want to have conversations with people who are not necessarily Christians. I have always, as a minister who had small groups and Bible studies, I could tell that people in church would adjust the answers.
Mm-hmm.
The answers, they would doctor their speech in order to say the kinds of things that people want to hear them say in church. In fact,
Oh,
people in
okay.
church will say things that will gain them status in church.
Do you
They'll
have
give
an
the right answer.
example?
Oh, do you believe the Apostles' Creed? Do you believe Jesus is coming back to this world to redeem it? Do you believe in the resurrection of the dead? People in church will say yes. But I know people in church have doubts, they have questions. What do you think about evolution and creation? Well,
Uh-huh.
people won't give you straight answers, partly because they know that church sometimes is not a place that wants to hear people's honest opinions. Now, I don't say that. I I would rather hear what people really think than to have them give me an answer that they think I want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Because the truth is, even if I disagree with them, if they're just giving me an answer they think I want to hear, we're not honestly going to have a conversation. And I, as a pastor, am probably not going to be able to be effective in terms of what I am supposed to do, which is help them believe the truth, at least as I see it, or my church doctrine sees it, what have you. So this has been a perpetual problem in church. Plus the fact that so churches are supposed to reach out to others who don't believe in God or don't believe as they do. And most of those people don't want to go anywhere near a church because
Mm-hmm.
of all the games that churches play. And so what happened after I started making Jordan Peterson videos is that I started having really cool conversations where people, because they weren't in church, would tell me what they really thought.
Okay.
I found that refreshing. And then
Mm-hmm.
I started a meetup, a Jordan Peterson meetup, Sacramento Jordan Peterson meetup, where lots of people would come into my building and we would have long, rambly conversations. And they would tell me exactly what can I swear on your channel?
Sure.
Okay, they would tell me, Pastor, I think you're full of shit. And I would rather have someone tell me they think I'm full of shit if they think I'm full of shit, rather than just smile at me condescendingly and walk out the door.
Yes, and just be silently judging you and then like later telling their friends or family like
Right.
this guy was full of it.
Are we going to have a real conversation? Are we going to actually deal with the questions that we as a culture and society have to wrestle with? Because if if all I'm doing in the Bible and Christianity and theology and with people isn't real enough that we can have an honest conversation, then why am I giving my life to this?
Mm.
And so, what happened as a result of the Jordan Peterson meetup and my YouTube channel was that I began having conversations with a whole range of different people. Early on, Strawn, who is a guy from South Africa, really was excited about John Vervaeke. And so he, just harangued me until I watched some of John Vervaeke's videos. And then John Vervaeke started his Awakening from the Meaning Crisis videos, which the quality was better. The old ones, you couldn't understand what he would say a lot of the time. And so then I started having conversations with John Vervaeke. And again, Christians were very hesitant. And I very much
Can you
understand Christians
explain
hesitate.
John
Go ahead.
Vervaeke, like who he is, what he's doing with regards to meaning?
Right. John Vervaeke is a professor at the University of Toronto. He's a colleague of Jordan Peterson. There's actually a very interesting conversation he had with Jordan Peterson a few years ago. John Vervaeke grew up Christian in a rather fundamentalist group, and basically slammed the door as he left the church. Now, he dabbled in it. He got very interested in Neoplatonism and Paul Tillich, but he went very deeply into Tai Chi, Buddhism. He's a cognitive scientist. And so I see John Vervaeke as a seeker after the truth. He loves Plato, he loves Socrates, and he is a seeker after the truth, and he wants to know what's
Mm.
true. Now, he's a non-theist. He's not an atheist. He's a non-theist, and you can watch John's stuff to find out what he means by that. But John is an example of a guy that I love talking to because he knows a lot, and I learn a lot from him. But I get a lot of, very early on, I got a lot of crap from a lot of Christians that said things like, you shouldn't talk to him, you shouldn't have him on your channel, you're promoting his work. And I've dealt with this for a long time because I had a blog. And if anybody who follows my blog, one of the common comments I get from things is I post anything I find interesting or might want to find again. And I do it without comment because it's just data. And then people are like, well, you're promoting. I'm not promoting squat. If you want to hear me promote something, ask me what I promote. But I want to talk about these ideas and I want to engage with people. And I think the church should be doing this. And I know the church always has. The difficulty that I think, see, part of my the problem with me is that I get talking too long. So that's why you should interrupt me when you want to. Because you'll probably make me better by interrupting me. So you have my permission to
Okay.
interrupt me. But in North America, so in Europe you had all these state churches where, you know, we're a Roman Catholic country, where, the official Church of England is the Anglican Church, and on and on and on and on. Come to America, you have this religious marketplace, which I think is healthy for the religious institutions and organizations and movements. I think the American open marketplace has been very good for that. But it has a corrupting influence that churches do a lot of self promotion to gain followers and to gain money. And what that part of the dynamic that sets up in American churches is we want to propagandize people, we want to tyrannize people because we are trying to build an army that will dominate our neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wait.
okay, fair
Do
enough.
we want that?
I think a lot of churches do.
Okay. I just needed to clarify. Like, is that
Do
a
you want
tenant?
that? I don't think you
I
do.
don't. That's kind
Yeah,
of
and I
the
don't
point.
either.
Like, that's the opposite of the first shall be last and the last shall be first.
And I think it's the opposite of, see, when I was in college, so I grew up, my father was a minister, my grandfather was a minister. I had a wonderful church upbringing growing up because my father was pastoring this very interesting inner city church. But my father was also very high in openness, non directive or tyrannical at all in terms of a pastor. As many would say, he would give you so much rope, he would give you so much rope you could hang
Yeah.
yourself, which is probably part of my fault as a pastor. But so I went to college and so I grew up in this weird little Christian Reformed church, which is all this mixture of all these different things. And then I go to college and there's some evangelicals there, but mostly it's Christian Reformed people at Calvin College in those days. And Calvin College was not a very tyrannical place. It was not Wheaton where you had to sign a pledge and promise not to see movies or go out with girls that do or anything like that.
Girls,
And
okay. Yeah.
and Calvin was very open, and they didn't make you go to church, they didn't make you go to chapel. And so what that allowed me is to, well, if what if I don't want to be a Christian? What if I think that the Bible is hogwash or propaganda or something like that? I should read it for myself. And so I started reading the Bible for myself, and I found Jesus to be a very interesting person
Mm.
because this evangelicalism that, so the Christian Reformed Church is sort of part mainline, part evangelical. It's kind of a moderate denomination, still fairly conservative, but anyway. And so I didn't find, when I read the Gospels, I didn't find the Jesus I expected to find.
Okay. Who did you
And,
expect to find?
well, I expected to find the kind of guy at the end of the evangelical chalk talk. Do you know what a chalk talk is?
I mean, like those little, like, flannel graph talks?
Yeah, flannel graph or chalk talks, or the whole evangelical shtick is like Scream in the Dark was a big thing in New Jersey, where you had like this haunted house, and so you go through this haunted house, and then you get out the other end of the haunted house, then you sit down and have a come to Jesus story to be a Christian.
Okay.
And so Jesus died for your sins. Well, if you read the Gospels, well, yeah, Jesus is dying, and but there's a lot that, why in the Gospels do we find Jesus arguing with people about whether or not he can heal people on the Sabbath? That's weird. And so you find Jesus with all these disputes that I didn't, I would sell light bulbs for our little Christian boys club at church, and I always be a little nervous about that Jesus would show up at Northside Chapel and overturn my light bulb selling, table in
Okay.
the church. But
No,
my
say it
parents didn't
isn't
seem to
so.
mind, so I guess selling light bulbs on the Sunday was okay. But
Yeah.
but but the Jesus I met in the Gospels was very different from some of the impressions I had gotten in church. So, and then um, I didn't decide to go to seminary. I probably had some daddy issues where I didn't want to be like my father because I look like him, and everyone called me Little Rev growing up, and
Mm-hmm.
so I wasn't going to be a minister. But then, okay, I'll be a foreign missionary. I'll do that because that's different. And lo and behold, here I am
Lo and
pastoring
behold.
just like my father did.
But
But
wait, I'm curious who was the Jesus you did find then?
well, he's kind of hard to contain. He's kind of hard to put in a little nutshell.
Well, the reason why this is interesting to me is I was just speaking with someone who is an ex Christian who's very, very, very against Christianity now. And usually it's not Jesus that people specifically point to for being an ex Christian. It's like a lot of what the church has done and Old Testament stuff. He's like, no, I don't like Jesus. He's mean to the Canaanite woman, very, very unkind to
Oh
her.
yeah, that's a fun conversation.
Oh yeah,
But he
well,
does
that
but
was
he
the
does
example
heal
I'm
her. He
thinking.
does heal her daughter.
Yeah, that's the results. I know,
Mhm.
man. I was like, I don't even know where to start there, but that is in my head. That's why I'm curious to hear the facets that you discovered that you didn't hear before,
But
because it's not as simple, kind, and quiet, nice Jesus, right?
exactly. And shouldn't the church be a place where that person can walk in and say, "I think Jesus is an asshole. Look how he talked to this foreign woman." I want a church
Yeah.
where people can walk in there and lay that on the table and not have everyone say, "Oh,
How dare you,
how
sir?
dare you? Flee from here, you."
Where's my fainting couch? Okay.
That's right.
So,
Where's my
okay.
faith? Bring me the oh
Smelling
oh.
salts?
And because I believe that that's written into the story. The book is written in a way that he should have that response because, you know, Jesus, I mean, and it's all over the Gospels. Guy comes to Jesus, my child is sick, and Jesus, oh my, a sick child. Let's off away and fix it. It's like, well, wait a minute. There were tons of sick children around. And if Jesus is who he said he was, well, wouldn't he walk through the village and say, "Oh, yeah, you've got cancer. Oh, you're going to last another 10 years. Oh, there's an
Boom,
accident
boom,
coming to
boom.
you in the future." I mean,
Yeah.
so, so the thing about the Gospels is that they force us to ask. Jesus had this incredible quality of, well, first of all, the image that even the popular public relations that people have of Jesus today just doesn't hold up scrutiny with the Gospels, because first of all, the one public fact about Jesus was that no matter how skeptical you are, if you at least acknowledge his existence, even if you just say, okay, it's just a story, why would he be so unpopular that bitter enemies in a culture war who could agree on nothing else about the world could agree that the world was better with him dead?
Yeah.
He was
Okay.
that offensive.
Okay, just to clarify, okay, so I'm thinking to clarify. There's the zealots, there's the Pharisees, there's the Sadducees, there's the Essenes. I
Yes.
don't know that the Essenes had a representative in the Sanhedrin, but there are a
they're
number.
they're like, screw you all, back to
Yeah,
the
they're out in the
bunker.
desert. They're out in the
Yep.
desert. They're the ones who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, people, in the Qumran area. Anyway, so there are these different factions who were very, very against one another, yet somehow they all eventually came together in agreeing on a plot to have Jesus executed.
Yes. And
That is to
collaboration
what you
with
speak
the
of.
Romans.
In
We're going
collaboration
to
with their bitter enemies, the Romans. Yes,
That's right. We're
that's the
going to get the
background.
Romans to kill Jesus. And
Mm-hmm.
and even in this scene where Pilate, who knows that this is a trumped up charge, he's got Barabbas, who is a real legitimate revolutionary that the Romans want to kill, and says, I'll be magnanimous once a year. Should we let Jesus go or Barabbas? And in other words, when they pick Barabbas to be letting go, what they're saying is what we want is a revolution, because Barabbas is the kind of guy we need, not
Mm.
Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And all right, we'll kill Jesus.
And that's what
And
happens.
that's what happens. And Jesus is, and now again, crucifixion is not, this is what we do to common criminals. No, crucifixion was a political form of execution by which the Romans demonstrated their power and cultural supremacy over what they regarded the Jews as this, they're just this people over there with these wacky religious ideas. So, the two, and I hate the way thieves on the cross. These weren't burglars that Jesus was crucified with. These were likely Jewish nationalists that wanted to see the Romans out, and they likely were killing Romans or trying to undermine the institutions of Roman domination.
Okay.
That's who Jesus is crucified with.
Okay.
And and even in those scenes, first they start out mocking, and then in one of the gospels, one of them turns to the other and says, hey, why are we picking on this guy? I mean, you and I, we know the political deal here. We were actively trying to undermine the Roman occupation of the Holy Land, but this guy in the middle, he wasn't one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And you know Father, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
Yeah.
Surely you'll be with me in paradise. And so,
But that
but Jesus is,
that's the
go
point.
ahead.
Yeah, that's the point, that he wasn't like them. And
That's
that's
right.
why he stands out
That's right.
2000 years later.
That's right. And all of these, I mean, Tom Holland makes this terrific observation about the gospels that, what these gospel writers had to do was write an account of Jesus that would be fresh and compelling in their day and be fresh and compelling to people in every other culture all over the world since then. And the fact that four authors did it in a tiny little short time span, and the only thing those four authors really have in common is the person they're writing the story about,
Mm.
is just an unbelievable undertaking in the history of human writing.
Mm.
And so it's no surprise that they're all about Jesus. So it's Jesus himself and his words and his life that was so utterly compelling and so utterly transformational that that he continues to compel and transform today. And the church is supposed to be the place of witness to that man. But the church is so often anything but
Mm-hmm.
that.
That's what that's what I'm okay. The question was, well, I asked you what it was that you saw, that you did, who was it you did find when you read the Bible for yourself, the Gospels for yourself. But the original question is, what is estuary? And so that's what this is. This is I love the explanation, but it's a long explanation as to why we need something other than what is current, so that we can talk about such things. Even you said even heretical things,
Yes. Even a place that
entertaining
entertains
them.
heresy. I
Yes.
got that from a friend who I shouldn't take credit for that because my friend is very articulate and he has a real gift of putting his finger on certain aspects in culture. And and see now, and this is part of the reason I'm going to have both Living Stones online, because the I think part of the problem is that in order to the church's mission is to bear witness to Jesus. In order to do that, the church does need a place that's a walled garden of sorts. And so on my church channel, I will teach about Jesus. I will talk about the Bible. I'll do all of that. If I did all of that on my regular YouTube channel, a lot of people would say, it's a preacher, he's talking about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't just want to talk about Jesus. I want to talk about Jordan Peterson and John Vervaeke and, even Jonathan Peugeot. So Jonathan Peugeot was an Orthodox icon carver, and I come from an iconoclastic tradition. I mean, the Dutch, when they kind of had issues with the Roman Catholic Church, I mean, they stormed into monasteries and destroyed statues and icons and these kinds of things. So, but here, I think what we need to do is we need to talk about these things. So why am I a Protestant and not a Catholic? Well, can I talk about that? I can talk about that. And what is a Protestant? And see, and I also think it's true that most Christian people are far more secular than they think.
Mm-hmm.
And most secular people are far more impacted by the legacy of Christianity than they imagine.
Mm.
And these things can be discussed in an estuary.
Mm.
And I like the image. I've had this image actually for a long time, and I probably have said the word a few times in certain interviews because I talk so much. But this is what the Jordan Peterson meetups in Sacramento were. And this is what Jordan Peterson sort of facilitated. I mean, I don't think we even quite know yet what Jordan Peterson did, but what he did was huge. And what he did was sort of broke open, he kind of broke open Christianity to a lot of anti-theists and a lot of people who had really bitten hard on the
new
the
atheists.
new atheism
Mm-hmm.
moment. Yeah. But he also kind of showed the church that, a professor of psychology from the University of Toronto can get 4 million views thinking out loud about the Bible. That's what got, when I saw Jordan Peterson, I looked in the mirror and said, what the hell's wrong with you, Vanderclay?
Yeah.
And so here's this, because the church says, well, we've given Paul the education and he subscribed to the proper doctrines. And see, I don't want to devalue that or diminish that. But here comes Jordan Peterson on the stage and people are like, I want to study the Bible. No, people didn't say that after listening to me. What was this man doing? And so it's like, I better figure that out because I don't want to stand before the throne of God and say, yeah, Vanderclay, yeah, yada, yada, yada. You did a lot of that. Jordan Peterson, he sure turned on a lot of people. What did you do?
Well, it's not by works of righteousness, Paul.
I know, but yet we are called to give an account for, what we've done.
Yeah.
And we all want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. And, how many talents did he give me? Mm. What have I done with my talents? Mm-hmm. And another thing that has always annoyed me, infuriated me sometimes about the church is we just play it too darn safe. Because as a pastor, say these certain things, and you have this nice career track as a pastor, and you preach the right sermons, you satisfy everyone in the church. So again, the same friend that talked about entertaining heresy, also talks about you get captured by your audience. And preachers are so often captured by their audiences. But here's the thing, Jesus never was. So Jesus is fabulously popular in the Galilee because of his preaching. He's one with authority, his miracles. Everyone's excited about him. And he looks at the crowd and says, you're all a bunch of mooks, and I'm not your knight, because you think you can bribe me with popularity, king? No, I will not. You will not make me your king. Well, isn't Jesus supposed to be king? Yeah, but he's a different kind of king. And so there was this imagination of what a Messiah should be. And there was intense pressure on Jesus to be that. And Jesus keeps saying, I won't be that. And so he doesn't use, are you the Messiah? Doesn't answer. Says, I'm the Son of Man. And it's like, and Jesus does that all the time because he's reframing. And so
Well,
then,
they would have
okay.
known Daniel. Like they would have known
Oh
in
yeah, yeah.
Daniel,
The
son
Jews would
of.
have known. The Romans would have said, what? But the
Okay.
Jews would have known that so he's saying something very messianic, but so
Not the
then
kind of
there's
messianic that they were
right.
expecting.
They had a mental script in terms of what a Messiah should be. And okay, you've got a big following. Now, let's be John Brown and let's bump off the armory at Harper's Ferry so we can start a slave revolt. Those are our scripts. I'm
Right.
just preaching Exodus right now. And those are our scripts. And Jesus says, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you can have no part of me.
And what
And
does
they're
that
like,
even mean?
and what does that even? That's exactly. And lots of people are like, he jumped the shark. I'm
But
off
even
this
that,
train.
Paul, like even that, what does that even mean? Like we just do it. We just take the sacraments. At least the Catholics are like, oh, it's literal. We've decided. Transubstantiation, that's what we're deciding. It's literally it turns magically into his flesh and magically into his blood. We've decided, at least they've decided what it is. We don't even know what it means symbolically. I mean, I did speak with Pajot about that, and he blew my mind with his answer. But anyway, but we in general, we're just floating around doing these little rituals. We don't even know what they mean.
Yes. Well, and it's worse than that. And that's what the Jordan Peterson thing, really helped give me some time to talk about. I mean, like I listen to people all the time. They use this word spiritual, and it's like, what do you mean by that word? And as a pastor, and I was doing it because I'd be in church and people say, well, saved. And I'd say, well, what do you mean by saved? And then they stop because pastors never ask questions like that. Why? Because pastors are too busy promoting themselves and their local church in order to grow big, in order to be on Christianity Today or what have you. And
Is this why we need estuary though? Like, is this why we need a space for discussing these things that you're? Is this why that's needed, or is it
I
supposed to
think
be in
so,
the
yes.
church that you're
I think
describing?
it needs to be, I think every church should have an estuary.
Okay.
And what do I mean by that? Every church, rightly within church, we have expectations, behavioral and propositional belief expectations, confessional expectations of people that is totally appropriate within a church, within the walled garden. Okay? But outside the church, and Pizzot kind of has this with his little icon, this cosmic icon that he did.
Mm-hmm.
You see water running out of his walls,
Yeah.
and to me, I'm not. Far be it from me to start doctoring Jonathan Peugeot's icons, but
Yeah.
I would open that up a little bit, and there'd be some reeds, and seals would. So I live in Sacramento, which just south of us is the Delta. And that's the major estuary for the state of California, this huge wetland. And it's all levied up now. And, Southern California wants the good water from the American. I mean, it's water's, as Mark Twain said, in California, whiskey's for sipping and water's for fighting. So water's really important here in arid California. But an estuary is a place where you'll see, well, the salmon go upstream. You'll see seals come in sometimes from the ocean, and they come up here and they hunt fish. And, this is where we're going to die of hardened arteries.
Wait. It kind of skipped. What?
Yeah. Churches that don't have estuaries are going to die of hardened arteries. Now, an artery,
Oh.
of course, is that thing in our body.
Yes.
But in California in the 1940s, because California is always worried about water, someone had the idea to dam up the California Delta. because it goes through the delta and then it gets kind of narrow and it goes out to the Golden Gate Bridge. And someone had the idea, shoot, what if we like built a huge dam and we kept all this lovely fresh water and didn't dump it out in the sea because we need all this fresh water. And so they built in Sausalito, California. It's a really cool place. It's sort of a museum now. They built the Bay Area model. And it's this, you can walk in, it's this huge room. It's like a warehouse, and it shows the tides and all the rivers coming in and the whole water system of the delta and the bay. And it's a really cool thing. And they built that because they didn't have computer modeling yet, because they wanted to know, what if we built a giant dam here and just kept all the fresh water to ourselves? That's what churches do.
Okay.
And what that does is it actually harms the church, and it doesn't. Jesus comes into this world. Why? To have a nice life? Well, if he was going to have a nice life, he should not have, given up the carpentry gig. He should have found a wife and settled down and had some kids. And, no, Jesus comes into this world for the sake of the world. And that is why the church is here. And so every church needs an estuary. The church needs to have its walled garden and to do the stuff inside. I get that. I work for that. I've had a career in that. But the church needs to share its water of life with the rest of the world. And what does that mean? It means, well, so we had some, I was helping to start meetups and talking about Jordan Peterson. And so we had a group in Chicago, and okay, they wanted to meet. And okay, well, it's one thing to meet in a house, because if you meet in a house, you do a meetup in a house, it's like, I gotta go over to somebody's house. I want to go to another place. And so some meetups were meeting in restaurants, which, okay, you can do a restaurant, but you get the waiter and the noise and everything. Churches are perfect places for meetups to meet.
Mm-hmm.
And so a number of these guys in the meetup are Christians, not all of them. And they asked me, where should we do a meetup? I said, talk to your church. And two of these guys talked to their churches, and their churches said no.
What?
So then I knew, I'm a Christian Reformed minister. And so who do I know in Chicago? The pastor of the Wheaton CRC I've had a few conversations with over the years. And so send him an email, say, hey, this is what I've got going. And people in the Christian Reformed Church kind of know a little bit of what I'm doing, somewhat. Some of them do, some of them like it, some of them don't. And could you let these people use a room? And generally speaking, in churches during the week, churches got rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. But they said yes.
Yeah.
Of course. They said yes. And so it's just give them a room. We give rooms to AA. We give rooms
give them
to
a room.
MA.
Hello. We're like hearkening back to like, there's no room in the inn for you, Mary and Joseph. Sorry. Hello.
And in all fairness to churches, churches do lots of feeding the hungry, food pantry, donations.
Yeah.
Churches do a lot of that.
do.
But when it comes to ideas,
yes,
they kind of freeze up.
Yes. Okay. Because that is something that I wanted to specifically ask you about, because you said that a lot of people are interested in the estuary idea. And like, I definitely am. I would rather like go to that as church.
Well, this is what I want to hear from you. So tell me about what you thought of when you heard the idea, and tell me how the thoughts you have about it.
Oh, I have a new home. because contextually, because my channel was not meant to have anything to do with my religious faith. It was just supposed to be IDW. Sorry, intellectual dark web, for any of you sure about. But most of you should be. I wanted to be in the ideas realm, in that sort of space, but it's as I get closer and closer to like looking into meaning and what is the source of our meaning, of course faith has to come in somewhere, because that's that's where meaning often comes from. And for me personally, I can't really divorce that from my channel, because my channel is Andrea with the bangs and that's me. So okay, with regards to the past few interviews I've done, I started off by going on my friend Mars's channel, and his channel is Transbra, and he wanted to talk to me about. Did you see this? I shared it, and I think you. I really thought
Oh,
I
maybe I did.
I think you
I'm
did. We
not
talked
sure. I
about
watch a lot of videos.
and sin and the LGBTQ community. And one of the questions I had was, why doesn't why doesn't the church want the celibate gays? No, that was in the next chat I did. But Mars wrote me in saying that is a good question. Why doesn't the church want the celibate gays? Anyway, so I was talking to him about what is it like, oh, is there a place in the church for those in the LGBTQ community? Because he's a trans guy, and so he's interested in exploring all ideas in this space, and he first wanted to talk about what is sin. And of course, I go in the typical missing the mark because that's what I know it is. But then I watched your all of your stuff that you've been doing about same-sex marriage, but you kind of have decided to go really far back and look at the sex lives of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's where you're starting. I'm not going to start there because you are, and I want to ask you about that. But I did the prep by watching that, and then your other interviews about the LGBTQ community and where Christians have gone wrong. And I ended up talking about how we just need to love people as they are, and that needs to be the starting point. Um, and then he changed the name of the episode to "Be Loved as I Am," and I almost cried. No, I did cry a little bit. So so that got me to thinking, okay, I want to talk more about this. So I ended up talking to someone from the Pajot group, because I asked the Pajot group about the margins and the LGBTQ community who are on the margins, and then how what is it like to move into the center, and that got a bit of a stir in that group.
Really? I'm so surprised.
And little naive me, I'm like, well, they're all about symbolism. They'll stick to the symbolism. And I was naive and to think that that would be it. And it's not that it had to be. They didn't have to stick to the symbolism, but I got, some interesting, whatever. One fellow I thought had some interesting answers. So I interviewed him about the LGBTQ community in the church. So I did my own interview where I'm like exploring this, and he very much did stick to the symbolism and talking about the margins and what is marriage? What does marriage even mean? What is the symbol of marriage pointing to? Those kinds of things. So I feel like that's a bit of a story about where I'm coming from, but then I hear you talk about Estuary, and that's where I feel like I've been with regard to the LGBTQ community, questioning about that and the place they have. And then what is marriage, and those sort of questions as to why is it so sacred that we're barring people who desperately want it. They want it so badly, and we're saying and we're like, no, but we're fine with divorce. But you can't have it though. Anyway, it's a whole nother talk, Paul. That's a whole nother talk. But the whole point is, I feel like I've been sort of searching in a heretical space, and then I hear you talk about Estuary, and I'm like, that's where I want to go, because I want to question why we do things. I want to, like, you are literally questioning, why do we marry? What is it for? Why is it sacred? And that's where you're starting with the patriarchs and what their marriages looked like. Not like ours.
Well,
unless you look at
some of those are coming
man.
around
Yeah,
again.
I guess it's coming full circle with polyamory here. So that's another, again, a whole nother talk. But I do want to participate in Estuary because the response I received was very, you've got to be careful with what you're doing in the best possible critique. And then the worst was like, oh, look at these liberals coming in with their liberal agenda. Like that was the worst response I got. But anyway, so but for the most part, actually, it was pretty good. It was a pretty good. This is like, oh, what about kids? Like, that's a valid question. I didn't even think to look in there. So it wasn't necessarily negative. It was just people like questioning, which is fine. But yeah, so that's where I'm coming from. And then you bring up Estuary, and then the next couple of weeks after I've done these little sessions on that. So tell me your thoughts. Yeah, tell me your thoughts on what you think of what I just said.
Well, let me ask you, the LGBT question the church is always dealing with insider outsider questions. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is constant. So read in the book of Acts. Okay, we've got these Gentiles. They're not circumcised. Are they in the church or out of the church? So we've got these, okay, then we've got these, as the Apostle Paul calls Judaizers. The Judaizers are saying these God-fearers, as they were called in the book of Acts, who are unwilling to be circumcised, are definitely out of the church. Paul, the Apostle Paul says these Judaizers, they should be out of the church. You read the book of First John. It's a very antithetical book. You know, if you're not in my church, you're Antichrist. Whoo! And so the church always, any place with a wall will always have issues of what side of the wall are you on. And so, and I think Peugeot, part of his real contribution is he rightly says, okay, let's have no walls. Uh, that very quickly everybody says that's a bad idea because and what we've seen culturally is that, well, okay, so we're going to be, so let's look at, let's say, the mainline churches. So there are, in almost every city, there are abundant churches that would fall over themselves, welcoming if you're trans, if you're gay, if you're a heterosexual nonconformist in one way or another, there are churches that will not only welcome you, but celebrate you. Okay? All right. And so, well, who is not welcome in that place? Well, all the people who aren't sufficiently celebratory about that particular group of people. In other words, you can't help but have certain dynamics go on once you have a boundary. All right? That's just what boundaries are and how they function with human beings. So what you need are, so someone made a comment, oh, your estuary is like Jonathan Peugeot's narthex. And I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on that. But churches have always had boundary water areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and those boundary water areas are problematic. They're always problematic. So we have, let's say we have the polyamorous clergy. All right. Well, how's that really going to work? Oh, we're going to have the church of free sex, which means, we're going to have the swinging church. Well, how well is that really going to do in terms of a stable group? Because the thing about, there's this wonderful book written about the Oneida community in the 19th century. The title of the book was Oneida, Free Love and a Well-Set Table. And it's the story of Noyce, who was kind of a visionary, and he believed in science and eugenics and developed this entire community. And it was it was a free love commune in some ways, but the person in charge basically decided you could sleep with anyone you wanted, but the one rule was you can't get too attached. Because
Oh,
once you get
Brave New
attached,
World style.
yeah, that's right. Because once you get too attached, well, we want this to be just us, not them. And these dynamics are always going to be with us. So you always have to deal with these questions. Estuary is a space which is intentionally outside the walls.
Okay.
And once you have that, they're going to be outside these walls. They're also going to be outside those walls. But it's a place that we can meet. And we
Okay.
all,
I didn't think about that. Like when like two opposing armies send in like people to make a truce or to discuss terms.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
is that where does that make sense, the things that I was like where I'm coming from wanting to discuss the LGBTQ community in the church? Like does
Absolutely.
that have a home in Estuary, I guess? That's where the question
Yes.
was.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that why, and again, in terms of stuff on my channel and stuff on my church channel, about the kind of the middle space is my rough draft for Sunday,
Mm.
where I give a little bit of people on the regular channel, a little bit of peek of what I'm doing in church. But on the regular channel, I'm pretty much open to talk about just about everything because YouTube is a place for everything. That's it. Remember I said early on, YouTube is a place for people with not a lot to lose. And but here's the thing. What I would imagine estuary will likely estuary will be a home for certain kinds of things, but what you'll notice is that estuaries also have boundaries. And just like, so you've got this army and that army, they have a white flag of truce. Well, they're parley. Well, there are rules about the parley. One of the rules is don't kill the other guy.
Right.
Because if you say, okay, white flag, let's parlay, and they all go there, and then one shoots the other, well, I guess we're not going to have that space
Yeah.
anymore. Now it's just back to
Yeah.
war. And that's why even warring groups understood we need to have channels of communication because we can actually have a win-win if we actually talk. So an estuary, and as a pastor, the reason I am saying every church should have an estuary is because if you don't have, um, well, think about the water cycle. Let's look at Jonathan Peugeot's cosmic cycle. So the rain comes down, you have a wall. What happens if the rain comes down, you have a wall, and there's no outlet for your fresh water?
I mean, it just pulls up.
You're going to have a reservoir.
Okay.
And a reservoir is a fine thing, but every working reservoir you find, say, in the state of California, is going to have a spillway. Why? You got to let the water out. You need the place outside the wall. If you don't do that, then we have what we would call stagnation. And that's
Yes.
exactly what we find in the
Okay,
church.
yes, because that's the other question I was going to ask. Why do you have to bring this up? Why is this not being done anyway?
It is being done,
Okay.
and I think it has always been done. I think, for example, the monastery movement was in many ways a function of this. Most churches throughout history, most healthy churches have had this aspect. So, for example, the complaint in the Roman Empire of a pagan king was that the churches not only fed their widows, but fed the pagan poor better. And it's like there's an estuary aspect.
Yes.
And people knock on my door and they have some expectation, sometimes they're disappointed, they have some expectation that they will be treated humanely. And even today, for the most part, churches have the idea that go down a street, see a church, if it's not COVID, if the doors are open and there's music coming out, you can walk your butt in and sit down. Now, you don't know how you're going to be treated or what that's going to be like, or if you're even going to want to be there, but the door is open.
Hmm.
Now, that open door means it should flow out too. And so, like I said, churches are, thank God, very excited often to be sharing money or food with the poor or clothing or money for organizations. Thank God that churches are doing that. But what about ideas?
And that's the thing. It seems like almost foreign to me to have the ideas be okay to discuss that seem outside of doctrine or dogma.
Yeah, and my question would be why? Because you're discussing them in your head. Isn't it better if we just take them out and talk about them here?
100%. But it's because that's what I literally received in different iterations when I'm going into a place that seems, what is the word? Like, I guess outside of doctrine. That's dangerous. That's, we can't just go accepting these sort of we can't just go become part of the world. Like, that's the worry. That's the worry I'm
Oh, yeah.
seeing.
But to hear is not to accept. I mean, and that's part of a dynamic that happens that, someone says something. Okay, they said something. They said something. That's what happened. They said something. It's shall we freak the heck
But
out?
ideas do have power, though.
Oh, they do. They do.
Okay, then you're kind of making the case for why we don't want to hear them. They've
Well,
got power. Be
the problem is
careful.
that they are already out there.
Yes.
And
Okay.
in this age right now, they're going to be out there. And so I would rather have the church take a step forward and again, pay attention to the so here you've got the church and here you've got the estuary, okay? So there are going to be different there are going to be different codes of conduct in the two different spaces, and that's okay.
Okay.
And we all manage those things too. There are things that your children can do outside that you will not let them do in the home
Right. Right.
as part of their training even.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids have picked that up. There are words we use outside that we don't use in the home. There are words we use in the home that we don't use outside. What's so hard to understand about that?
Right. I think it's hard when you apply it to not teaching children and teaching a congregation.
Well, again, there's the walled garden here. That's the congregation. And so if you go to my church channel, which is quite a bit less popular than my personal channel, we're gonna teach and talk about things here. Now you've got an issue like gays, and you say, well, how do we work on this? Okay, well, how do we work on this? Let's talk about that. And part of my frustration is that we so often forget a whole bunch of things we know when we get scared or anxious or defensive or uptight. And so part of what happens in an estuary, hopefully, will be some of the things that we learned in church we can take out into the estuary. Some of the things will come in from the sea.
Mm.
But these dynamics have always happened. And I think we can do better both in the church and outside the church in talking about these things. Because let's take the question of your friend who is trans. Is your human? Yes.
Absolutely, he is. Yes.
Say your friend is a human being. What is the church rule about your posture towards that human being? What is the demand of Christ to that
to
person?
love thy neighbor as thyself.
To love thy neighbor as thyself. That's right. Now, all of us know that we have neighbors that don't agree with us about things, that don't necessarily live the way we think they should live, and all of that. If we were to say to our neighbors, I demand that you agree with everything that I say, that's called tyranny. You can demand that all you want. It ain't going to happen. Parents learn that quickly. I demand that my children never deviate from my priorities for their lives. Well, good luck with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to happen. So, okay, well, let's have a conversation as adults about that. So there are norms and rules in that estuary space too, and we learn them. But here's the thing about in Christ's kingdom, you have that law, love. Now, what's interesting about this is that people out there outside the walls are saying, hey, you're supposed to love me. Fair enough. They know the rules on the inside.
Yes,
And so
they do.
that's a demand. Okay. But then you have the next question. What does love require? And you know that as a mother of 3 children. What does love require about the ideas that your boys have?
Well, I mean, loving them enough to discipline them at the right time.
Yeah. Loving them. And then when they become adults, loving them enough to disagree. You still have boundaries. And your 25-year-old son might say, Mom, if you loved me, you'd buy me a Camaro. Then you say, oh, really?
Okay. Isn't
I
this
don't
what
think
love
that's
is?
what love requires.
Well, love, what is Paul?
Yeah. So have the
That's what
conversation.
these are for is yes, what is love look like? What does it look like that what type of love are we talking about as opposed to what those outside the walls are talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, this is where Peterson gets his that depends on what you mean by love. Like that
Yes.
depends on what you mean by God. That depends on what you mean by marriage. I want to ask you why did you decide to start that series on same-sex marriage?
I'm not done with it.
I
Whether I'll
know,
ever
I'm
finish is
waiting.
another thing.
I've been
Why did
waiting
I?
for more
Because
content.
because I want to facilitate both sides to understand each other a little better. And there are a host of off the shelf. So I have two baseball bats in the room next to me that I gathered from homeless um, beddings around me.
Okay.
Um, and it's not that these homeless people are looking to. Why do I find only all bats and no balls? It's because they're not playing baseball. So I usually confiscate the bats because I don't
Okay.
want my windows broken and I don't want to get clocked if I walk out of here at night sometime. So I
Yeah.
confiscate the bats. Well, what we have in our culture is a whole bunch of conversations, and we've got all these clubs that are at hand. And so here's the one club. You're supposed to love me, you Christian. Bang. And the others, you're supposed to follow the will of God, you degenerate. Bang. Okay, well, after we've done that, maybe we've learned that that wasn't necessarily the most productive thing. Why don't we actually look at this is an extraordinarily complex and in some ways important question. And the church had settled its mind about this a very long time ago. But a lot of the things in our culture that raise the question about these people's access to the public life, so on and so forth, also arise out of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that these liberation movements come out of Christendom and not some of these other places in the world?
Can you explain what you mean by coming out of Christendom?
Well, part of the difficulty now is to find a place in the world that isn't deeply um, impacted by Christendom. Um, in 1999, the Dalai Lama, who, if you ask who's the Dalai Lama, oh, is the Dalai Lama left or right? Oh, the Dalai Lama's left. Is the Dalai Lama about doctrine and saying no to people? No, the Dalai Lama is about love. And think about the reputation of the Dalai Lama, and then Google what the Dalai Lama said with respect to same-sex behavior in 1999, and people would be like, I, I, why would the Dalai Lama say that? I don't know. Why would the Dalai Lama say that?
Well, what was that? Will you be the Google for me,
Sure.
please?
He said, no, I don't think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Why wouldn't it be a good idea? So very quickly, you have to ask some questions. Um, well, what's really going on underneath the surface here? And there are lots and lots and lots of layers to this conversation, and most of the time the conversation happens at the level of baseball bats and no balls just hitting each other. And it's like, all right, if you want to play that game, go ahead, but I can promise you it doesn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I start this little series on my channel because I want to look at some things other than the baseball bats that are at hand.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, one side, I saw one comment on Twitter. Somebody said something nice about me, and the other person said, "Yeah, I like his stuff, but he's hateful towards gays." Oh, okay. I'm hateful towards gays. This is what they know about me. All right, that's fine. and
But
so
you were
and
literally trying to give more nuance.
but here's the thing about nuance. There's just about like everything else. Yes or no about nuance. What do you think about oh, just name any difficult thing out there. What do we think
Well,
about,
I
what
don't
was
know.
I reading about
Abortion
recently?
is one that's a tough one
Oh,
too.
abortion. There's a good one.
Yeah.
Abortion. What do you think about nuance with respect to the abortion debate? Oh, no nuance allowed. It's a woman's right to choose. No, life begins at conception. No nuance allowed. Oh, okay. Well, how's that working for us? Maybe we should have a conversation. Maybe we should ask some questions. What is this fight really about? Because a woman's right to choose. Oh, okay. So you're going to no, what I demand is that the medical establishment assist me with this. Well, that's different from doing it yourself. Yeah, but I can't do it myself safely. Oh, well, there's another layer. If well, this is part of my body. Well, if I were to walk into an emergency room and say, my hand, it falls asleep. I don't think my hand's terribly pretty. Would you cut it off for me? What do you think the ER is going to say? They're going to shuttle me to the psych ward.
Well, and
Well, this person wants to cut off their hand.
well, the other thing is too is, that could be from the other perspective, is the lack of support for women who might have their babies, except that they feel like they can't do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's the social aspect of, what if the church came around those who were unwed mothers, and rather than shaming them, loved them?
Well, yeah.
That's another aspect.
Have you never seen a church do that?
I've seen different iterations.
Yeah.
Some not good.
And
some good.
Sometimes the church as well, sometimes doesn't. But the point is that there are many more questions that go along with these debates than, because I hear someone, let's say, have someone that say, they're gay, and they're like, I can't stand it that the church keeps me out. And I said, well, the Unitarian Universalists have every flag you can imagine on their front lawn. They'd love to have you there. Well, I don't want to go to that one. Oh, okay. So you're really upset that this church, or that, in fact, some won't let you in, but would you really want to go there anyway? No, I don't really want to go there. I just want to have the option of going there if I want to, and have them treat me the way I would want to be treated. Well, I kind of want that option everywhere I go. When I walk into a car dealership, I was like, money? No problem. Take the keys. That's what I want.
No, but I think that churches are held to a higher standard.
But money is different for us. So, I mean, and my point, and I can argue this exactly the other way too. My point is that, well, why do you believe they should let you in? Well, because of Jesus.
Right.
Why do you believe that you have been treated in a way that no image bearer of God should ever be treated? Well, that's because of the Bible. Well, I think the Bible is a hateful book. So you're going to get rid of that image bearer of God thing? And people just don't know these things. And so, the real thing that Jordan Peterson did in many ways was sort of up the resolution in a whole bunch of areas for a whole bunch of different people. And whereas they had maybe thought that, well, I think I know everything. Well, maybe you don't know so much. And maybe I don't know so much. And maybe if I would sit down with a trans person, I might be a little less dogmatic and a little more understanding about what it's like to be them. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
So maybe we can start there.
Yeah. So that's what Estuary is for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and more. Why Estuary? And now a lot of people are, well, I haven't developed this either, but a lot of people are thinking that, well, this is going to be one thing. And my idea is no, because I want it, and you know this because I actually got the idea. So there was a guy who was talking in the IDW space. Dave from Rebel Wisdom often refers to him that the key thing of the IDW is not what's on the different hard drives on the servers.
Oh yeah, from Ryan Bennett. Yes, I interviewed. Yeah, IDW protocol is what he calls it.
IDW protocol. I think Estuary is more protocol than what's on the hard drive of Paul Vanderklay's server, because I think we have a living. So the Jordan Peterson meetup was sort of a Livingstone's Estuary, and that then produced Bridges of Meaning, which is its own estuary, and that spawned my meetup spawned the Fresno Jordan Peterson meetup, and that was an estuary, and then the Chicago one, and then we were starting our tour when COVID came out. We visited Church of My Friend in Tucson, want them to have an estuary. And their church is already very estuary-like anyway. And so I I want to be a promoter of estuaries rather than the estuary itself, because here's the thing. All of you are smarter than me. I say, oh no, someone's dumber than him. I'm sure they are, but all of us together are smarter than any one of us. And that's part of the genius of estuary, is that when we start talking, maybe we'll start learning some things, each of us. And maybe some of these wedge issues and things that we've been doing like this, maybe we can start to open our hands and do a little bit of this. And we still have thumbs out here. The thumbs never quite get in, but maybe some of the fingers will touch. And that's okay.
Have you gotten any pushback against this idea of estuary?
A little bit. Mostly from Christians. And understandably so.
Yeah.
Because well, I'm not Christians have something to lose. But every gift is losing something. That's the point of a gift or a sacrifice. You lose something. And well, the church is supposed to bear witness to Jesus. Well, what did it cost Jesus? His life. Okay. Well, hopefully, but that imagery runs through this. And the Apostle Paul talks about being poured out. And that in many ways is the Christian life. And what the flow of the Christian life is, that we pour ourselves out, first of all, because everything we have has been given to us. So the water comes from above and we pour it out. And the whole point of the resurrection is, well, if you allow your life to be poured out like Jesus was, well, what did Jesus get back? Read Philippians 2. Not only his life, but the kingdom. And so the whole flow of Christianity is that we pour out our lives to each other, and God gives us the kingdom. And that's the Christian life. So, yeah, is there danger of starting an estuary and some real smart atheist is a better arguer than podunk pastor, and suddenly everybody in the group takes off on some crazy idea that some very articulate person has? Yeah, that's a danger. But tell me where that danger isn't already.
Mm.
So, and it's also not the case, as much as a lot of smart people like to imagine it is, that the person with the best argument wins. What's really interesting about Jesus' story is, where's the argument?
Mm.
I mean, what we see is a guy splayed naked on a cross looking to be a political loser. Is that the argument? And the Apostle Paul says, arguments, what I point to is Christ crucified.
And that's how we
so,
win, by losing.
That's right.
That's...
And every mother knows that. Every mother that does not win by losing, basically, the kids grow up and think, wow, mom was really withholding and frigid. No. What's the good mom? The good mom lays down her life for her children. What's the good husband? The good husband lays down his life for the family. This is Christianity. This is what it's always been. This shouldn't be a shocking revelation to the church. Unfortunately, it is for many.
Oh, Paul. You have a way to make things sound so simple, but go and do likewise.
Yeah, well, it's hard.
It is hard. That's why it sounds simple, but in practice, that's where we have the working out our own salvation with fear and trembling, because it's really hard.
I had a near altercation with Daniel yesterday.
Oh,
he was having some conflict with a homeless person, and yeah, doing all the, But the thing is with him, and he's out of control, and then he starts coming up on me and pushing his finger in my chest, and I pushed him back, and that kind of, I think he kind of wanted. Kids do this all the time. How far can I push you? Well, you can push me a ways, but there are boundaries here.
Right.
And he was a little surprised when I pushed him back. Like, well, are pastors supposed to push back? Well, sometimes they do. And that's the thing with Jesus, because people hear me talk this way and they think, well, that's just going to make you a doormat. Did you read the Gospels and get the idea that Jesus was a doormat? You're just complaining about what he did to the Syrophoenician woman, which the story ends up with her getting what she wants, but he's going to make a point first. And this is another confusion that we have, that, being a Christian means being a doormat, which means someone comes along and says, I feel like it's my right to do X. Oh, okay. That you feel that that's your right. Well, congratulations. Well, you ought to agree if you love me. Oh, well, those arguments don't wash with your kids. This person isn't your kid. No, it's another adult. You're still another adult. You still have the freedom of your own mind. You still don't have to agree. Well, if I don't agree, he'll hate me and he'll deride my reputation. And Jesus says, blessed are you when people speak ill of you. What do you mean blessed? Well, there you go. Have a boundary. People will speak ill of you.
I mean, okay, it's not bad to have boundaries.
You need them. And that's part of Peugeot's genius. The biggest organ in your body is your skin. And as talk to a burn victim, even if you get a terrible burn in this just a part of your body, it endangers your whole body. Your skin is that important. But look at what skin is. It's the semi-permeable boundary. It's living, it's breathing. Well, that's what our boundaries should be like. Sometimes we need walls. Sometimes we need doors.
Sometimes we need estuaries.
Sometimes we need estuaries.
All right, that's where I'm going to end it. Because
Okay.
we could just keep going.
Yes, we could.
Thank you so much for this wonderful discussion that I knew would be fruitful. And it was.
Good. Well, thank you for what you do. And I don't get a chance to watch all your videos, but YouTube serves them up, and I usually look at the thumbnails, and sometimes I'll listen to little pieces of them. So and thank you for being a part of the reason I very much wanted to talk to you, because I noted in Bridge of Meaning you said, well, Bridges of Meaning is my church, and I thought, well, this is something that is worth talking about, because an estuary really isn't a church.
Right. I want it to be a church, though.
And every church should have an estuary. And this is where we could use Peugeot language. Is the church the narthex? No, but every church should have a narthex.
I've never heard narthex before.
Yeah, well, that's because we're Protestants.
Okay, I'll have to look it up.
Narthex is this. It's a boundary area of the church too.
Okay.
And well, we could say every home should have a front porch. What's the front porch for? The front porch is for meeting neighbors and for sitting and talking.
Okay, so yes, your Saturday night before sermons, those are my sermons during COVID. And since I've been more involved in Bridges of Meaning, I feel like they're my community more and more. I'm still figuring out how to get more involved, but I'm trying to just, hey everyone, I don't know what you're talking about. What did I just step into? That's what I do.
Well, and this is and as with estuaries, there are times of high tide when the estuary is full of salt water. And there are times of flooding or low tide when the estuary is full of fresh water. And so these things will flow. And so, the keepers of Bridges of Meaning, and I think they've done very well with this, and they're continuing trying. Well, we're getting a little too much Christian.
Okay.
Oh, we're getting, but part of why I wanted Living Stones online was Christians are sort of used to dominating. And so you got to kind of hold them back and say, we've got the church here. That's probably a good conversation for within the walls. This is a conversation. This is a space for other
And
conversations.
it's an opening up of what the narrow typically would dictate, but opening to different ideas and asking the
Yes.
questions of why do we do this.
Yes. And in, an argument, your same sex argument, an argument within the walls is, well, this is what the word of God says about that. Okay, that's a perfectly good argument for within the church. This is what the word of God says about that. You say that in the estuary, everyone's like, I don't even believe in that
I know, but
language.
okay, oh, Paul, I was trying to wrap up, but now I'm like, I think that should be moving into the church, asking why.
Sure. I mean, you can ask why, but the language in both places is going to be a little bit different.
I still have more, but I think that that'll be another conversation. Do
That's
more of
perfectly
your
fine.
the sex lives of the patriarchs, which will eventually
Okay.
answer these questions I have about the LGBTQ community. Like if you could do more of those, that would be wonderful.
What I'm about to say will sound horribly liberal and leftist to a lot of people. But the important thing for you to decide is less what's your answer about that. You need an answer. Everybody needs an answer. The answers are things we need. But what's really interesting is that, again, speaking from a Christian perspective here, someday you will be quizzed by your maker to say, how well did you love these people over here? The answers are going to have a part of that, but less of a part than than a lot of people might suspect. And some of the really witnessful Christians have been ones that have often not necessarily had the answer that everyone always assumed would make towards really loving. And that's exactly what we see in Jesus. Oh, Jesus should be, oh, a Syrophoenician woman. Oh, she's the outsider. Oh, and Jesus is like, you know, do dogs eat from the food of the
Well,
children?
I
Are
know.
you calling her a dog?
I know, and that's mean.
That's mean. But the point of Jesus is nice is nice, but it's not
Well,
good.
why was she
Nice and good are
okay,
not the
but
same.
why? I know they're very much not the same. But why was he so good and kind? Sorry, both of those things to the Samaritan woman at the well.
Did you read that
Yes, I did
conversation
a
closely?
paper on it in university.
He was a little, what did he call her? When he says, go call your husband, what was he
Well,
setting
he knew
up?
that she wasn't married.
Did he completely cave on Mount Gerizim? You people,
Yeah.
you people worship what you don't know.
It
That's
just
all
isn't
hardly
quite
pushover.
as insulting as from the dogs, but maybe that's my modern reading.
Well, it's just not modern. It's Jesus has the freedom to manage a conversation as he sees fit. He's Lord of his language, as are we. Jordan Peterson says, they're not going to put pronouns in my mouth. That was an important thing. And that's a part of Western culture that I think comes from Jesus. And now you have the agency. In the land of nice, there is no agency because and it doesn't finally work. So, but this is part of Jesus. And please tell me your children haven't pulled the "you're mean to me, mom" argument on
Well,
them.
I mean, if they have, I don't remember 100% the words, but it's I do this because I love you.
That's right, don't you though? And you do.
Yes.
And sometimes you change your mind because sometimes we do it to them because I'm having a bad day and I don't want to get off the couch to help you.
Actually, that
Um,
100% is very often.
yeah. So I mean, this is what we deal with, but you have to. The real problem of pastors is that they're often quivering masses of availability. You don't find that in Jesus. But we say that's what we want as a culture, but we don't really mean it. because we know that in a real relationship, um, there's both. There's yes and no. And why wouldn't that be the same with God? And
Ooh,
Jesus, I mean, we want
that's a
God to be all
good.
yes.
Yeah, that's a good. Okay, we're for real gonna wrap
We're
up.
for real
For
landing the plane
real.
now.
For realsies, Paul. You're
Okay,
just
I'll shut
you
up.
got no. There, it's wonderful. I'm just trying to manage my time. So I'm trying to say no. I'm gonna say no. We're done, Paul. We're done. But
Okay.
thank you for any time you give my videos. By the way, that's very kind of you to give any, even give my thumbnails a look over. I appreciate it
Well,
very
thank
much.
you for thank
Thank
you
you.
for and thank your husband for sharing you with the world and for
Yes, he's
sharing
watching the
because
kids right now.
and I want you to there's a boldness that goes to doing what we do. And there's a humility because, like we talked about before we started officially, I will, there are videos in the past and things that I've said that I want to take down, but I think, no, I want them up. I don't want anybody saying, oh, Paul Vanderklay, he was so smart. He always knew what to say. He never put his foot in his mouth. Leave it up there. Let him see my
Mm,
foot in my mouth. But, because let's use the gifts God gives us to bless the world. That's at the heart of Estuary.
right. Okay.
There's
Awesome.
the end.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Paul.
You're welcome.